Right, greetings all. Hope this finds you well as always. It's now time for the latest update from the machine shop, where we're up to and what we're on with. The first bit of stuff we're on with today is I showed these bits of variously 76079 and 80136 last week with the small bushes which have worn to varying degrees of ovality and out of roundness and whatnot. Well, we've had young Duncan Jackson in today, and he's been busily pressing out all the old bushes that need renewing. These bushes are solid bronze bushes. You can see there's a series of holes drilled around the periphery of them. These are for lubrication. They're grease lubricated. And if you look, the other feature to note is that machined in the outside of the groove, where my thumb is, you'll see there's that groove. The idea is that each of these rod forgings, you'll see the little hole in the bore there, just above where my finger was. That hole is connected to this reservoir here. It was originally oil. It's been changed to grease because it's actually far more reliable. There's a grease nipple on the top of there. So you basically pump that full of grease. Grease comes out there. And then grease comes, this groove here, when that bush is pressed home, lines up with that hole. And so grease goes into this groove, travels around the periphery of the bush, and is then introduced in between the bush and the pin through those various holes. Now these, as I said, all need renewing because they've worn out of round to varying degrees of tolerance, well, all over acceptable limits, but yeah, some of them are worn far more than others. So there's the first batch that's been pressed out. There's also two combination levers up the top, which have had further bushes removed today. So the next job for somebody will be starting to use material like that big lump of bronze at the back of the bench there, starting to make more of those out of that. So that's another job that's coming up. Right, other things, Craig, who's another of our volunteers, has, following a few trials and tribulations, has now been started coming back in regularly, which is brilliant because he's a smashing bloke and he's doing a grand job. The job he's on with are these piston packings for Repton. As you can see, the first thing he'd done is they're these two-part packings. He'd sliced these up into three the previous week. What he's now starting to do is he's starting to rivet them together. As you can see, you've got an inner and an outer segment, and so when these are fitted into the engine, to hold them in alignment effectively, the inner segment is offset slightly. You can see how there's the edge of the inner and there's the edge of the outer, so that they sort of hold them together. What Craig's been doing is then doing this offset and then securing them in together with copper rivets. So those are now, all the last thing they need doing is they just need the last bits of those rivets just machining off absolutely flush. And then the last thing we need to do is gap them. We put a bit of MIG wire into the joint, MIG welding wire into the joins, and then there can be the internal diameter here can be bored out to finish size on the piston rod. So that's the little job he's done with and doing a smashing job. You can tell he's a model engineer. His riveting is lovely. So anyway, that's that job. Other things we've got, Brian, who previously last week was doing a smashing job on motion pins, I've had to pull him off that job, unfortunately. It was a shame because he was doing a grand job. I've had to put him on to making some gauge frame fittings as a bit of a rush request. These are various fittings off the gauge frames that have been brought to our, as the steam tests have come nearer, we found that some of these are worn beyond acceptable usage. So what Brian's setting to is we've got bits out of 80136 and 76079 here. And so what Brian's doing is he's busily machining up new ones. You will also see, sure, we've got an old fitting there and a new one. But here, they've been breeding because we've got two. This is so we have some spares in stock. This is something I'm deliberately trying to do from now on. I'm trying to ensure that we have a stockpile of spare parts in stock. It's something historically we haven't been as brilliant at doing as we could have. And so now when I've got somebody like Brian busily rattling me out a batch of parts, I make sure that as well as rattling out the bits we need, he also ploughs out a couple of spares. So those blanks are roughed out. Tomorrow he'll start putting hexagons onto them and then threading them. They're threaded a weird size. It's actually 1 1/8 by 12 TPI. Amazing though it may sound, we actually have a tap for that thread. So the other thing before he starts threading is he'll also use that tap, which we've tried into the fittings and the gauge frames. It's a nice snug fit. He'll use that tap to make himself a little ring gauge, and so that way he can it saves him time when he's busy machining them. The little bungs up the top, which are yet to do, they are actually British Standard Pipe thread. So, yeah, one's 12 TPI, the other's British Standard Pipe. Why BR went for 12, I haven't the faintest idea. I was actually expecting them to be 11. That's a more common standard. So, anyway, that's that job that he's well on with. He should have that for well. He'll certainly have the back broken a bit this week. He'll probably be on into it in next week. But it's just something that's come up with stuff facing steam tests and whatnot. In other news, I will point a camera at some rod brasses on the floor on 7609 and say they're finished, they're done, they're ready to go. But we've got one. There's just one which doesn't fit. Well, no, it fits beautifully. I had forgotten that it needs a radius on the outside end of it, so it's come back in here for a bit of fettling. But well, hopefully, if I can get the lights to work, we'll go and see where the rest of the rod brasses have ended up. Because Dave Chalmers and his merry band have started pressing them back into rods. And there's another bit of press. Speaking of pressing, there's some more Duncan's been doing. There's 2 combination levers, both off 76079, with yet more redundant bushes pressed out. And exactly the same idea as I showed you earlier. Grease lubricated, radial groove around the bush to distribute the grease. The combination lever in front, which has nothing pressed out there at all, is actually off 80136. That's purely here because we need it for some measurements to make up some other parts, just like that other rod that's on the floor down there. Actually, we need that for 76. So, yeah, so there's another job that's done. Now, hopefully, if we come down here, out into the wilds of the boiler shop, it's dark, very dark. Hang on, let's see if we can find some lights. Let there be light. There was. Right. we have light. We also, for the curious, have 75029. We will be doing work on this in the near future. It's just a bit delayed due to other priorities at the moment. And we have some of the rods off 76. And we have the big hydraulic power press. And we have a nice new shiny rod brass that is now following a bit of rectification work. Dave Chalmers has to attend a basic numeracy course tomorrow. We need to discuss the difference between a 3 and a 4. That bush is now ready to press. It's unfortunately, its measurements on it weren't quite right, so I had to rectify that this afternoon. That's a brand new bush. It's actually the, what is it? It's the, I don't know, but it's now on the floor. Come here, yeah. Little tinker. Right, it is the right hand leading. You'll see it's got the local number on it. It's got RL, which is my slang for right hand leading. So that's what that's going to be. Amazing though it may sound. When it fell off, it hasn't dented itself, which is good. Right, so that's a brand new rod brass, new casting, slightly shop soiled because some idiots dropped it on the floor. Milled in the keyway there to locate it. It's also got an oil pad hole drilled in as well. And there is the eye in the rod that'll be pressed into tomorrow. Another job we've had to do on this rod is manufacture this thing, which is a new gradient pin bush. The idea of the gradient pin is you'll see there's another eye in the end of that rod, beyond where the rod brass sits, the intermediate rod brass. That's because these coupling rods are in 2 sections. They're in 2 sections to allow the wheels to articulate as it goes over rail joints and irregularities in the track and whatnot. They're articulated very creatively with a gradient pin, which is around here somewhere, but I can't instantly see it, which runs in this bush, which in turn is pressed into the rod there, okay? So that's the last job we had to do to make get these rods back ready to go. That bush needed machining. It's been chewed out of a lump of EN16, and then that could be pressed in tomorrow morning. And then I think once that and the new rod brasses are fitted, that's the last of the jobs to be done on 76's coupling rods. There's still, let me get this right, there's still a big end there's that big end to sort, and then these are the connecting rods, and they need new little end bushes as well. We've got material for them on order. That should arrive soon, probably in the next week, and then we can get on with that. Other news? some empty floor in the boiler shop. Just for those of you who haven't seen such a thing before, just remember it, record it. We're not used to seeing large areas of empty floor in here. It's usually a pile full of stuff. So yeah, as I said, yeah, 75029, ongoing project. We, to be honest, it's very simple. We will start working on her when the boiler is getting ready. The boiler is down the bottom end of the shop there. It's that boiler nearest the door we can see. Hey, we're going to buy the welding on Hartland's boiler, which is really nice. There's a guy come from North Bay to do that work, and I know Nick posted about it earlier in the week. Trust me, that welding is lovely. It really is. So anyway, right down the bottom end of the shop there, that's 75029's boiler. And that's got quite major firebox work going on at the moment. And once, as that starts to reach a stage where the boiler's getting ready, we'll start focusing on the frames, because they don't actually, apart from that missing wheel set, they don't actually need massive amounts of work doing to them. So anyway, folks, something a bit different, something different bit of the shop, and yeah, it's where we're up to and what we're at. Hope you found it educational, informative as always. Now take care, and I'll see you around.